Morning I found out my grandson's graduation party had already happened, 3 days earlier, without me. I was standing in my kitchen in my robe, pouring my second cup of coffee. My neighbor Eunice caught me at the mailbox. She meant well. She always does. She said, "Oh, Clifford, wasn't that just a beautiful party for Eli?" "Oh, wait, sorry, I mean for your grandson. I saw the photos on Bev's Facebook. Look like a wonderful time." I smiled. I nodded. I said something like, "It sure was something." Then I walked back inside, set my coffee mug on the counter very carefully, and stood there for a long time staring at the backsplash my late wife Helen had picked out 31 years ago. Little blue tiles with white grout. She said it reminded her of the coast. My grandson Theo had graduated, and nobody told me. I want to explain what kind of man I am before I go further, because it matters. I'm 68 years old. I spent 34 years as a civil engineer with the county, the last 12 as department head. I built my house with my own hands on weekends over the course of 2 years, with help from my brother-in-law and a crew of guys from my church. I paid off my mortgage when I was 52. When Helen got sick, I took early retirement to care for her. When she passed, I kept going. That's what you do. My son Alec is 41. I won't pretend we had a perfect relationship after his mother died. He pulled away. That happens. I understood it as grief, even when it started to look more like convenience. He married a woman named Sybil about 9 years ago, and from the beginning, I made every effort. I attended their wedding in Charlotte. I helped with the down payment on their house, $40,000, drawn from a savings account I had built over 20 years. I never asked for it back. I never brought it up. It was a gift, and I gave it as one. Theo is Alec's son from a relationship before Sybil. That boy means the world to me. Since he was about 8 years old, he would spend 2 weeks with me every summer, and we'd fish the creek behind my property and watch old westerns. And I'd teach him things: how to read a blueprint, how to change a brake pad, how to make my mother's biscuit recipe. When he turned 16, I helped him buy his first truck. When he got his acceptance letter to Tennessee Tech, I sat down at my desk and wrote a check for $80,000 into an education trust I had set up specifically for him with my financial advisor at Raymond James. I did not do this quietly. Alec knew. Sybil knew. Theo knew. I told all of them, this is for school, for books, for tuition, for a place to live that isn't a dorm closet, for a real start. So you understand, when Eunice mentioned the graduation party at the mailbox, it wasn't just a social slight. It wasn't a scheduling mix-up or a lost invitation. I had put $80,000 into that boy's future, and his father had hosted a party to celebrate that future. And I was not there. I went inside and I called Alec. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Dad," he said, in that particular flat tone he uses when he knows something is coming and he's already decided how to handle it. I said, "Eunice mentioned Theo's graduation party." There was a pause. Then, "Yeah, look, it was small, last minute. Sybil's family was in town and it just kind of happened." I said, "Alec, it was 3 days ago." Another pause. "I know. I was going to call you." I asked him what Theo thought about his grandfather not being invited to his own graduation party. He said Theo understood. I asked him what that meant. He said it was complicated. I told him it didn't seem complicated to me at all. He told me not to make this into something. I told him I wasn't making it into anything. I was asking the direct question and getting the kind of answer that told me there was something he didn't want me to find out. He hung up. I sat with that for a day. Just one day. Then I started making calls. The first call was to my financial advisor, Carl. I asked him to pull up Theo's education trust and walk me through the last 12 months of activity. There was a pause on Carl's end that I didn't like. He said he wanted to meet in person. I said I'd be there at 9 the next morning. I drove to his office in Knoxville, sat down across from him at that big oak desk. He turned his monitor toward me. The trust had $18,400 in it. $18,400. In an account I had funded to $80,000 less than 3 years ago. I kept my face very still. I asked Carl to walk me through every withdrawal. He did. Over 22 months, starting about a year after I established the trust, there had been 11 separate withdrawals. The authorization signatures on file were mine, except I had never signed a single one of them. I drove home without the radio on. I sat in my driveway for a while. Then I went inside and called my attorney, a woman named Patricia Hale who has handled my estate planning for 15 years. I told her what I'd found. I said I needed to understand my options, and I needed to understand them quickly. She told me to gather everything: the trust documents, the withdrawal records, anything with my signature on it. She said if those signatures were forged, we were looking at criminal fraud, and I needed to file a report with the sheriff's office as well as notify Raymond James in writing so they would freeze any further activity. I did all of it that afternoon. While I was gathering documents at my desk, I found something else. It was a letter tucked into a folder Alec had left at my house the previous Thanksgiving, a folder he said contained some insurance paperwork he needed me to look over. I had set it aside meaning to go through it, and then the holidays got busy and I had forgotten. I put it out now and read it carefully for the first time. It was a letter of intent to transfer a parcel of land I owned. 11 acres along the county road, land my father left me, land I had never once discussed selling to a real estate LLC. The LLC name meant nothing to me. The signature at the bottom, above my typed name, was not mine. I picked up the phone and called Patricia again. She told me to stay calm and not contact Alec. She said she would reach out to the county register of deeds first thing in the morning to see if any transfer had been recorded. It had. 7 months ago. There was a second call I made that evening. I called Theo directly on his cell phone. He was at his apartment. He had been living with a roommate since January, a fact I had not known. When he picked up, he sounded startled to hear from me. Then he sounded guilty. I asked him gently whether he knew about the trust. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Grandpa, I'm really sorry. I asked Dad about the trust money for spring tuition, and he told me you had changed the account structure for tax reasons and that you were handling it. I didn't know. I told him I believed him. I told him it was not his fault. Then I told him I was going to make sure he had what he needed no matter what." He cried a little. I did not. I had things to do. Over the next 10 days, I learned more than I had known in 41 years of being Alec's father. The LLC that now held my 11 acres had Sybil listed as managing member. The company had been formed 8 months before the land transfer. She had also, around that same time, taken out a home equity line of credit on the house Alec and Sybil owned, the house in which they had invested my $40,000 gift, against which she had drawn $55,000 in 2 draws. The HELOC was, of course, entirely within her legal rights, since it was her house, but with the trust withdrawals and the land transfer, the picture was becoming clear enough that I could see the whole shape of it. And then there was the thing that made it personal in a different way. Patricia told me she had spoken to a woman at my county courthouse while researching the land transfer. This woman had mentioned, almost in passing, that when she had asked about the ownership change, she had been told by the man who filed it, who matched Alec's description, that his elderly father was not really competent to manage his own property anymore, and that the family was getting things in order. Not competent. I am a man who still balances his own books, maintains his own property, serves on the County Water Authority board, and drives himself to every appointment. I have not forgotten a single thing. I know exactly who I am and what I have. And my son had told a clerk at my county courthouse that I was losing my mind. I let that sit in my chest for exactly one night. The next morning I was on the phone with a physician friend of mine, Dr. Harold Fenn. Not for reassurance, but because I wanted a clean cognitive evaluation on record. He referred me to a neuropsychologist in Knoxville. I went the following Tuesday. I scored in the 92nd percentile for my age group across every measure. Dr. Fenn got the report and wrote me a letter. I had it notarized. Patricia filed the fraud complaint with the district attorney's office the same week. We also filed a civil action to reverse the land transfer on grounds of forgery. Raymond James initiated their own internal investigation and froze all activity in the trust account. The county sheriff's department opened a case. Through all of this, Alec did not call me. Not once. On a Thursday evening, about 3 weeks after my conversation at the mailbox with Eunice, my phone rang. It was Alec. Sybil was with him. I could hear her voice in the background, the tight, coached quality of it, like she had written him a script and was reading along. He said he wanted to come over and talk. He said there had been some misunderstandings. He said that with everything going on, he thought it would be better if we could sit down like family and work through it. He said he was sorry I had missed the graduation party. He said he was sorry I had missed the graduation party. I said he was sorry I had missed the graduation party. I said, Alec, I need you to listen to me carefully. My attorney has filed a fraud complaint with the DA's office regarding the forged withdrawals from Theo's education trust. A civil action has been filed to reverse the transfer of my land on Crestwood Road. The county sheriff has an open case. Raymond James has frozen the trust account. I have a clean cognitive evaluation on file with a neuropsychologist in Knoxville, in case anyone asks. I heard him exhale. I heard Sybil say something I couldn't make out. Dad, listen. I'm not finished, I said. You told someone at the county courthouse that I was not competent to manage my own affairs. I want you to understand that I know you did that, and I know why you did it. I also want you to understand that it did not work. There was a long silence. You can come by if you'd like, I said, but there is nothing to negotiate. The only conversation we will have is the one where you tell me where the rest of Theo's money went. They came the next afternoon, both of them. Alex sat across from me at my kitchen table, looking like a man who had been awake for several nights. Sybil was quiet in the way she never usually was. He did not bring up the graduation party. He did not offer an explanation I hadn't already pieced together. What he did was ask, very quietly, if there was any way to handle this without it going further. I looked at my son. Really looked at him, the way you look at something when you're trying to decide if you still recognize it. And I said, no. I said, you stole from Theo. You forged my name. You had someone at a public office told I was incompetent. You threw a party for my grandson's graduation, and you didn't invite me. And now you want to know if we can keep it quiet. I shook my head. No, we cannot. I asked them to leave. Alec paused at the door. He said, Dad, I know you're upset, but you're going to regret this. I said, I know what I'm doing. He left. That was the last conversation we had. The civil case was resolved 4 months later. The land transfer was reversed. Alec and Sybil reached a settlement agreement with Raymond James that included full repayment of the trust withdrawals, $61,600, though it came through their attorney and I was not there to see it. The DA's office filed charges. I will not know the outcome of that process for some time, but I gave my statement and I told the truth, and that is all I can do. What I can tell you about Theo is this. He is doing well. He started at Tennessee Tech in the fall, on time, because I replenished the trust immediately from my own savings. He's studying mechanical engineering. He calls me every Sunday. He came down for Thanksgiving and we sat at my table and ate the meal I cooked. Turkey, sweet potatoes, green beans from my garden and my mother's biscuits. And he looked around the kitchen with those blue tiles and he said, Grandpa, I really love this house. I told him it was going to be his someday if he wanted it. He said he'd want it. He don't spend much time thinking about Alec anymore. That sounds harder than it is, maybe. When you have given someone 41 years of honest love and they choose to look at you and see only an asset to be managed, you realize the grief you're carrying is not for the person they became. It's for the person you always believed they were. That version of my son lived mostly in my hope for him. The man who sat at my kitchen table and asked me if we could keep it quiet was a stranger. I wake up early now. I make my coffee. I sit on the back porch and watch the light come up over the tree line along the creek. And I think about all the mornings Helen and I did the same thing, back when we were young and had no idea how the story was going to go. She would have been angry about what happened. She would have been heartbroken about Theo. And then she would have made me a second cup of coffee and told me to stop sitting still and do something about it. I did something about it. That's enough for me. I think about Theo calling me every Sunday now, and I think about how close I came to losing that. Not because of what Alec did, but because I almost didn't look. I almost let the discomfort of asking hard questions stop me from seeing what was right in front of me. That's the thing nobody tells you about being taken advantage of by someone you love. The danger isn't just in the person who's doing it. The danger is in your own willingness to explain it away. I had explained away a lot of things over the years. The distance after Helen died, the slow drift, the way Alec would go quiet when I asked about money. I told myself it was grief or stress or just the way grown children sometimes pull back from their parents. I believed what I wanted to believe because the alternative was too painful to sit with. What I know now is that choosing not to see something clearly is still a choice, and it has consequences. When I finally pulled those trust documents and saw what had been done, I couldn't unknow it. And once I knew, I had only one real decision to make. What kind of man was I going to be in response to it? I wasn't going to be the man who covers it up to keep the peace. I wasn't going to be the man who calls his son and gives him a chance to talk his way out of it before the lawyers are involved. I had spent 68 years building something, a reputation, a name, a record of doing right by the people who depended on me. And I was not going to let embarrassment or sentimentality talk me into protecting someone who had chosen to weaponize my trust. That took something from me that I'm not sure I had always had. It took the willingness to be honest with myself first, before I could be honest with anyone else. I had to look at my son and stop seeing the boy I had raised and start seeing the man who had forged my signature on a document and told a county clerk I was losing my mind. Those two things, the boy and the man, lived in the same person, and I had to let go of one to deal with the other. And then it took the willingness to do the hard thing anyway. Not to blow up and make threats and let anger drive the car. To call Patricia, to drive to Carr's office, to sit in that neuropsychologist's waiting room and take a 2-hour evaluation, not because I doubted myself, but because I refused to let anyone else create doubt about me. To file the complaint and give my statement and let the process work, even knowing it would be slow and uncomfortable and final. What I got back at the end of that was not just the land or the trust money or a clean legal record. What I got back was myself, the version of myself that Helen would have recognized, the one who doesn't flinch from the truth, even when the truth is about someone he loves, the one who protects what matters most, and who understands that Theo's future matters more than Alex's comfort. I didn't do any of this because I stopped loving my son. I did it because love without honesty isn't love. It's just accommodation. And accommodation, in my experience, is the thing that lets problems grow in the dark until they're too big to ignore. Theo starts his second year at Tennessee Tech in the fall. He wants to study bridge design. I told him that's a fine thing to build. Something that holds weight, that people depend on, that has to be right or it fails. He laughed and said I would say that. He's not wrong.